Miami missed out on their top target at running back. Here's what the big board looks like now.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, and on this episode of Locked On Canes, is there actually a trio of candidates, not one, but three candidates to be the next athletic director at the University of Miami? And this hire is really important because Miami Athletics has a lot of momentum right now. Dan Radakovich, who's retiring, did a nice job at the U. You've got to hit a home run for this next hire to build on that momentum. We'll talk about who may be up for that job, including but not limited to the name we talked about at the end of last week. Boy, speaking of last week, if you watched and listened to our Locked On Canes episodes last week, you know I was really optimistic, and I wasn't the only one who was really optimistic about Miami landing four-star running back Myson Johnson-Cook. Miami had a lot of momentum. You know, we'd thought at the end of the week the Hurricanes had maybe successfully defended the late pushes by Kentucky and then by Auburn. So we went to sleep on Friday night feeling like there was a really good chance Miami was going to close on Saturday for Johnson-Cook. You wake up Saturday morning, we start to hear the buzz shifting from the 305 up to the plains, that Auburn was making a really powerful late push, and then verbal commitment was locked in around 2 p.m. on Saturday. Myson Johnson-Cook announces he's going to be an Auburn Tiger. So how did we get here? I'm disappointed. You guys know I'm a big fan of Myson Johnson-Cook, and I certainly wish him well. He is a big, powerful back. He's Mark Fletcher size, but a little bit faster. I think he could have, and you know, it's not over till National Signing Day, of course. Even after National Signing Day, it's not over with transfer portal and stuff. But yeah, I think he could have been a great Miami Hurricane, and I think he absolutely can be a great Auburn Tiger. You know, I know the buzz coming out of his ultimately picking the Tigers over the Hurricanes, it starts to make a little more sense from a Miami point of view, but I do want to say this loud and clear. Very seldomly are recruiting battles won strictly because of money. And I say that because I know that no matter what team you're a fan of, you know, when your school loses a recruit to some other school, everyone likes to say, well, you just outbid, you overpaid for him. I do my SEC voice because those complaints come from a lot of SEC fans. And then, of course, when the player picks your school, you say it had nothing to do with money. You know, we recruited him so well. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. You know, I'm sure with Auburn, you know, they're in rebuilding mode. Auburn has not done better than 6 and 7. They've had a lot of 5 and 7 seasons, 6 and 7 at best over the past 6 years. Brand new coaching staff there with Alex Golesh. You know, they are rebuilding where Miami is reloading. So I'm sure Auburn probably sold him on the idea that we're going to build this offense around you, that like you are going to be our guy and you're going to have a clear opportunity at playing time and starting immediately. You know, in that regard, Miami can't promise that. Obviously, Miami can show him, you know, hey, you look a guy, Mark Fletcher, who's a similar running style and stature to you, see how he's developed, how well he's doing. And I do think Myson Johnson-Cook really, really likes Miami. But certain factors were at play. And then, yeah, on the financial side of it, we did hear coming out of Saturday that the bidding for this player reached a point where Miami would have had to go 7 figures for a running back to get this verbal pledge. And that was something that Miami was not willing to do. Obviously, you know, Miami allegedly and other programs are willing to go 7 figures for certain players at certain positions. But in this aspect, given that there are, and I don't think there's anybody at running back that they like more than Myson Johnson-Cook, but there are other players that Miami does really like at that position. They trust their evals. And I don't think this was a particular position where they were willing to go that high for this specific player. There's a parallel to be drawn to a year ago. And I think the decision Miami made last year is going to end up working out this year. I think there's a direct parallel to what happened last year with Derek Cooper, four-star running back out of Chaminade Madonna, who Miami ultimately lost out in his recruitment to the Texas Longhorns, right? And there were, rumors about, whatever gigantic NIL package the Texas offered him, and Miami was not willing to go that high because Javion Mallory, who Miami did land out of West Boca at running back, was someone that Miami really loved, and they felt that at the various price points that they made the right decision there. And, obviously Javion Mallory has not played in a regular season game yet for the Hurricanes, but based on the way he's come out of spring football and based on the way he performed in the spring game, and Myson Johnson-Cook was there watching Javion Mallory, and he sees Miami has a really loaded backfield right now and may not have the opportunities to walk into a starring role at Miami the way he can at Auburn in 2027. But Javion Mallory, I think, has done really well, and I don't think anyone inside that building is regretting having him instead of Derek Cooper right now. And I think that there may be, and, this is me saying this, I think that there may be some optimism, that they could kind of come out of this one in a similar way, even without landing Myson Johnson-Cook. So the primary targets now, as we understand it, at running back, and some really good players are in the mix for Miami. I think priority number one now has to be trying to close on Ty Keys. Ty Keys is a four-star running back out of Poplarville, Mississippi. I've watched this young man on film, and he's an athletic freak. He's 6'1", 200 pounds, so really good size already heading into his senior year of high school, and his athleticism is astounding. I think he could do a great job at Miami or wherever he lands, and Ty Keys, after a recent visit to the U, said it on record, Miami is now in front. Like, Miami is the number one for me. So this is a relationship the Hurricanes are going to continue to build and hoping they can get a verbal pledge here. So I think Ty Keys is near or at the very top of the board now that Myson Johnson-Cook has committed to Auburn. And listen, for a side note, because I know if I don't say it, people in the comments will say it, Miami will not necessarily stop recruiting Myson Johnson-Cook. Like, we know Mario. A few years ago, Mark Fletcher committed to Ohio State over Miami. Miami ends up flipping him that November. Jordan Lyle was committed to Ohio State over Miami the following year. Miami flipped him in December. So the Canes don't give up. And based on what I told you earlier, Auburn every year has gone 5-7, 6-7, 5-7, 5-7. I don't necessarily think Alex Golesh in his first year there is going to do dramatically better than Hugh Freeze did the last few years or Brian Harsin did the couple of years before that. So, if Auburn has another poor year, you never know. And I will also point out, and I know that group of 6 schools don't put a ton of players into the league, but it's worth noting, Alex Golesh coming over from USF to coach at Auburn now, in his time with the USF Bulls, did not get a single player drafted. USF has not had a player drafted to the NFL since 2018, which was long before Golesh even got there. USF has had a longer NFL draft drought than FIU and FAU, who put players into the draft in 2020. USF hadn't gotten a guy drafted in 2018. So, Golesh doesn't have a history of putting players into the NFL. Obviously, it's going to be a lot easier to do that at Auburn than it was at USF. Let me be clear about that. And Auburn is a historic program, but they have not had recent success. So if Auburn doesn't have a very good year, you never know what can happen come November or December. So maybe Miami has not stopped recruiting Myson Johnson-Cook. But the other top names on the board, I would be really happy, and I think every Miami fan should be happy if you're able to land Ty Keys out of Mississippi. He's not the only Mississippi running back target, because Tyson Robinson is another one, another 4-star back. And actually, Ty Keys is the 14th rated running back in the class. Tyson Robinson is the 15th rated running back in the class. So these guys are back-to-back Robinson is 5'10", 199 pounds, a really good player. So he's probably either, number 2 or 1B on your board behind Ty Keys. And then Brennan Lacey out of Frisco, Texas, a 3-star running back, 5'11" and a half, 190 pounds, is another one that I think Miami is right in the thick of in their recruitment. And I saw my guy E.J. Holland at On3, and I think Gabby at 24/7 also said this, that Miami could be interested in taking 2 running backs in this class, because you are going to be losing 2 running backs next year. Hopefully they both get drafted. Mark Fletcher, 2026, this upcoming season will be Fletcher's final year. It's going to be Marty Brown's final year. And obviously you never know who might, transfer out, but you're losing at least 2 running backs next year. So Miami might be willing to take 2 running backs in recruiting. So I could see it playing out that you get either Ty Keys or Tyson Robinson, with someone like Brennan Lacey maybe being the second running back in the class. And so again, this comes down to Miami, I think, looking at the situation with Myson Johnson-Cook and saying, for budgetary reasons, maybe you don't spend 7 figures on a player when there are other running backs that you really, really like who wouldn't cost you that much. And then you can use those, 7-figure funds on other spots. Obviously Mark Matthews at offensive tackle is one we really look at. A couple thoughts on that situation. I was just talking with a former Miami offensive lineman on the phone, and he had some thoughts about that. I want to bring that to you guys when we come back. Plus, are there actually 3 or more candidates for Miami's athletic director job, despite reports that one candidate was offered the job? There could be others in the mix. You want to keep it locked right here? We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, like skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours just made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support Locked On Canes by saying you heard about Indeed on this show. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. My friends, if you consume our content every day, we call you an everydayer. And if you want to make your everydayer status official, join the Everydayer Club. When you hit that all-access tier of the Everydayer Club, you get exclusive episodes of the Canes Colada, a special show I do just for the Everydayer Club. You get newsletters into your email box. You get one-on-one texting with me. Try it out. Go to lockedoncanes.supercast.com. Join the all-access tier of the Everydayer Club today. I was thinking a lot about, when Miami missed out on Myson Johnson-Cook on Saturday. The first place my mind goes to is, like I mentioned to you, first of all, and this has been widely reported, that, you're not willing to reportedly go as high into the 7-figure range because there are other running backs who would be less expensive that you really like and you trust your evals. Okay? That's one part of it. Then the other part my brain went to was, all right, if you were maybe considering spending close to 7 figures on this player, now that you're not spending that, do you allocate more into a possible bidding war for Mark Matthews, the 5-star offensive tackle out of St. Thomas Aquinas? Because however that one plays out, and he's hometown, Miami's done well recruiting St. Thomas, and they have been recruiting Mark Matthews for years. And I hope that time and that energy pays off in the form of a verbal commitment. But you got Texas A&M pushing very hard. And Texas A&M, a serious recruiting program, a serious NIL program. It's not necessarily going to be easy to land Matthews. Now, Miami has been the trending leader for a long time. We said the same thing about Myson Johnson-Cook. We said the same thing about DJ Jacobs last December. So Miami's been the trending leader for a while for Mark Matthews, and the decision could be coming soon there. And I hope Miami gets this one over the finish line. And so, yeah, the thought did cross my mind that whatever money you saved on Johnson-Cook, you can add more into that Mark Matthews war chest. So we'll see if it plays out that way. But, I think sometimes, because again, I think part of it with Johnson-Cook might have been, your running back room is really loaded, and it's still going to be pretty loaded in 2027 when he would get to you. You could say the same thing about offensive line. So I hope that Matthews, really wants to be a Cane and doesn't mind competing, because I just had a good conversation on the phone with friend of the show and former Miami Hurricanes standout offensive lineman Kelvin Harris. And like Kelvin brought up to me, like if you talk about the situation that that Mark Matthews would be walking into if he chooses Miami would be, on the left side of the offensive line, left tackle, your starter there is going to be Jackson Cantwell till at least through the 2028 season. So that would be 2 years where a generational guy has that position locked down in Cantwell. And then you look at the competition on the right side at offensive tackle. Ben Congdon is someone, following Matt McCoy, who might be trending towards possibly starting there. And if not him, Joel Irvin, who's a true freshman right now, really athletic and a really good player. So you would have to compete for your spot. I don't know for sure. I'm not an expert on Texas A&M's future depth chart. I'm not. But I don't know if there's like an easier path to being the starting left tackle or to getting playing time there. So these are other factors you have to think about when you weigh Miami versus Texas A&M. Again, it's not always just about money. I want to make that loud and clear. College football fans always love to say, if you miss a player, it's because the other team overpaid for him. If you land a player, it had nothing to do with money. But there are other things that have to do with recruitment than money. But again, Miami, I think, is doing a really good job recruiting Mark Matthews, and I hope they can get this one over the finish line. And I will also say, ultimately, they did not get his verbal pledge this past Saturday, and it stings. I do think Miami worked really, really hard recruiting Myson Johnson-Cook. And I've seen Miami fans on social media trying to blame the new running backs coach, Fabian Upshaw. Like, how did he whiff? Like, I don't think the blame goes on Upshaw. I think he's done a good job trying to close that since he came aboard the staff. I know Dennis Smith, Miami's GM, has worked really hard, and obviously Mario Cristobal has worked really hard. And sometimes you think it's going to go your way, and then at the last minute something changes. I think that's what happened here with Johnson-Cook. So, there are factors. I don't think you can always blame specific people on the staff for a recruit not going your way. But I certainly hope that Mark Matthews ends up going Miami's way. And I'm not saying Miami won't land him. I am saying, though, there are other factors in terms of depth and playing time that can influence decisions of these players. And I hope in the case of Matthews, he really wants to be a Hurricane. He's really confident, and he's ready to compete, because I think that's what it would take to get on the field consistently early at Miami. So interesting stuff from, and shout out to Inside the U 24/7 Sports. David Lake wrote something about the athletic director opening, which actually got me really excited, because when this job reportedly came open on Friday, we did an episode about it Friday night. A lot of the reporting, like from the Miami Herald on Friday, made it look like it's a one-horse race to be the next AD, that Michael Yormark, who is very polarizing among Florida Panthers fans, former Panthers president up until about 11, 12 years ago, who a lot of fans thought like he was kind of too much of a salesman, and that sometimes the sales and the sponsorships, it was like so, I don't know, shameless for lack of a better word, that it was kind of at the expense of the hockey team. So he was unpopular down here. Now, I think Michael Yormark has done a really good job over the past, 11, 12 years as the president of Rock Nation Sports. And I think his twin brother, Brett Yormark, has actually done a really good job as the Big 12 commissioner. And again, I think Miami, for their next athletic director, is really going to be looking for somebody who is more adept in this era of like the transactional NIL era of college sports to really thrive. And I think Yormark is someone who could, but I don't want him to be the only candidate. And I thought David Lake had a great update on this, that not only is Yormark in the race here, but there are a couple of others in the race, including Jim Frevola. I'll get to him in a second, who is currently the president of business operations and co-CEO of AFC Bournemouth in the English Premier League. So he's dabbling in proper football right now, but he's a Miami grad who has worked extensively at the UFC, was a top executive there, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Vegas Golden Knights, and Tampa Bay Lightning before he went over to Britain for the past few years. So he's in the mix. More on him in a second. And Jeff Purington, who I didn't know as much about, who's an executive vice president with Learfield Sports Properties. Lake says he's another name to know in this equation because Purington was a vice chancellor at Arkansas State University from 22 to 25, and he also worked at Alabama for 15 years, rising to the executive deputy director of athletics there. And Nick Saban is known to be a fan of Jeff Purington, or Purington, I don't know how to say his name, but that he apparently is someone who Saban would endorse. But on Jim Frevola, I know Frevola a little bit. He's like a good friend of Mark Hochman, from the Hawk and Crowder show, South Florida radio legend. And I remember Frevola, he had some position at the University of Miami before he started getting these promotions, like with the Tampa Bay Lightning and the UFC, these other places where he's worked. So I think Frevola, to me, is someone who's had a lot of success in his various spots, and he's a Miami guy, University of Miami grad. I think Jim Frevola could do a great job here. Hey, he's over there in the UK. He's not English. He's American. He's probably tired of eating beans on toast and fish and chips every single day. Wants to come back down to South Florida. I think Frevola could be great down here. And, I know Michael Yormark has his fans, and he also has his haters. I don't think Jim Frevola has any haters. I think that guy is universally beloved by those who have worked with him. And again, this Jeff Purington, who apparently Nick Saban likes, I think could be interesting as well. So, I don't know. I feel like maybe the favorite for this is Michael Yormark, because Barry Jackson of the Herald reported on Friday night that he'd been offered the job. So that probably makes him the favorite. And Michael Yormark, by the way, has a daughter who attends the University of Miami, so he'd probably love, to be closer to his family and to work down here. And I think that could make it work. I think any of these candidates sound interesting. I would just say get the right one. Get the one who you really think is going to maximize the value, the marketing, the earning potential that is what had been a sleeping giant for so many years of University of Miami athletics. Let's get this hire right, whether it's Yormark, Frevola, Purington, or somebody else. I'll put my name in the hat. Donno's willing to do it. I just hope they get the right, and I'm probably not the right person, by the way, but I hope they do find the right person. We'll talk to you all again next time. Thank you so much. We're going to do an episode tomorrow. We're going to do a crossover episode with Brian Smith from the Portal podcast. We're going to talk about Miami's roster, the present and future. We're going to break it down. So we'll talk to you then on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.